All righty. Well, welcome to my podcast. I'm David Shepard. And if you're getting this, it's because you're a subscriber of my Substack account. And I wanted to do something for everybody, and that is with kind of a weekly wrap up. And on this weekly wrap up, I've got a great guest and the perfect person to have, Phil Hamilton, former delegate, Virginia delegate from Newport News. So, Phil, thank you for joining me.
Well, David,
Uh,
thank you for the invitation.
well, this is a new thing for me. I know we have done another podcast last week, but that was for a different show. And this is the inaugural show. I don't even have a title for it or a name of the show, but this is for my Substack subscribers. And we'll see how it goes. The plan is just to talk about weekly events, not just the columns that I wrote for the week, but also the politics of the week and your views on different things. And it's good to have a guest, someone like you, because I don't think people are going to want to watch 40 minutes of me talking politics. So it's good to have another guest. Um, well, I think the biggest news, and it started on Sunday, was when I learned that former President Biden had prostate cancer, that it had spread, I guess, the fourth stage and spread to the bone. And two thoughts, and I wrote a column about this. I felt certain sadness because, well, he's a fellow human being and a former president. And it was kind of scary to think that someone who's got the best healthcare system in the world, the finest doctors, access to Walter Reed, and yet this clearly was growing for a long time. And um, that was scary, but it also, the conspiracy theories are out. Did he know about it beforehand? Did he just find out on Sunday something that was growing for so long? Because doctors say it's a slow growing cancer, it takes years. Or the final, I don't know what you think about that or your first reactions to that.
Well, I mean, part of that story that you didn't hear initially, but I've heard since during the week, was that the last time his PSA was tested was 2014. Now, I get an annual physical.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I'm not over 80, but I get an annual physical, and every year from the blood test, they test the PSA.
Yeah.
I know that he's had health issues in the past, and I just find it hard to believe that his physician, the White House physician, Walter Reed, and wherever he goes for these physicals, wouldn't be kind of tracking his past health issues, as well as just in routine care, in a blood test, be checking his PSA. I mean, you're talking 11 years.
Yeah.
So he may not have had it in 2014, and all of a sudden, a week ago today, he finds out that, oh, you've got stage 4 prostate cancer, and it's now metastasized into your bone.
Yeah.
I know it sounds very strange to me that situation occurred, and I find it even more, I guess, disheartening that a medical doctor wouldn't be more attentive to the past medical history and be doing a PSA every time they did a physical.
Yeah, I agree, especially if it runs in the family. Cancer did run in the family. And someone said he had prostate issues several years ago, so you think you'd want to check that. And I'm not a
It's
doctor,
been
but it just
reported.
seems to me you'd
Yeah.
probably want to check that.
Well, it's been reported that he had an enlarged prostate.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you've had that situation in the past, I would think that would almost become a requirement in any type of physical examination. But like you, I'm not a doctor either.
Well, it just added more to the conspiracy theories of sort of a cover-up that we know mentally is declining and apparently physically is declining. The other thing that added fuel to the conspiracy theory that he already knew he had cancer and they were hiding it is a few years back, he had made the comment that he said about pollution. And he said, and that's why so many of us in Delaware, like I, have had cancer. Now, later, the White House played cleanup and said, well, he misspoke. It's kind of an odd thing to misspeak, to say, yeah, I had cancer. Well, I guess I didn't really have cancer. So it's an odd thing to misspeak about. So that added fuel to the conspiracy theories.
Well, a lot of those types of statements were considered gaffes or misspoke.
Yeah.
All right, you might have a gaffe, you might misspeak,
Yeah.
but when that's all that you do,
Yeah.
is have gaps and misspeak.
Yeah.
You kind of wonder if everything's in order.
Yeah, I agree. And that and of course, the other famed thing about the mental problems would have been the Jackie Walorski situation, Congresswoman from Indiana. Several weeks earlier in September of 22, she had passed away. Maybe it was in August of 22, but in September, he had an event. Members of Congress are there. And he says, "Where's Jackie? Is Jackie going to be here?" But he had sent out
Yeah.
condolences. So that's not just a minor slip, that you forgot this person died. I mean, um, but as you and I were talking about earlier, I I certainly think he was out of it mentally, but I do think it was his family that was hanging on, pushing him in. And I wrote a column where I talked about when I first started working, talking to this guy several years older, and we were talking about he had a big family to support. He had credit card debt, and I guess it came to the light that he was paying the minimum payments or whatever. And his
Mm-hmm.
comment was, "I'll work till I drop. I'll work till I drop." And you probably heard the same thing that won't be able to retire. And I
Right.
just thought about that guy, and I thought, my God, that's sort of what happened to Biden. I think the family trying to get him to run again, they would have worked him literally till he died. So that
Yeah.
I thought was sad, not to have a retirement. He deserved the
Well, and
retirement.
also the story that's come out, then the speculation that Hunter Biden was in the Oval Office more than Joe Biden was, and was almost the de facto chief of staff, which then gets back to, well, we know how powerful the chief of staff is, and how they're the ones that are running the operation and everything else. And I don't know, you hate to see that, but they've never put a definitive end to the conspiracy. They've never what I think, come clean. And had they done that early, the story would not continue to grow legs.
Yeah.
And now that you've got all these people that are claiming they were aware that things weren't 100%, now writing books or being interviewed for books or whatnot, these are other people. I don't remember hearing that Donald Trump was quoted numerous times in this book. It was not Donald Trump. It was not Republicans. It was other people that more or less were allies. And they would have no reason when they were being interviewed to be making up stories, particularly stories that would perpetuate the uneasiness about what people were hearing to start with.
Yeah, and I often wondered. I think I know the answer to this. Apparently, he went like a year, I guess, without a cabinet meeting. I kind of know why he didn't do cabinet meetings,
Right.
because
Right.
they could have moved against him. And I think that was the threat to get rid of him in the end. The threat was to get him out of the race. They could cut his funding. They already started slashing his funding and leaking information. I think they're going to start leaking stuff against him, and then potentially 25th Amendment amendmenting him. In other words, to get rid
Yeah.
of him that way. And I think that's what finally got him out. I think those types of threats.
Well, if you remember the last cabinet meeting, Jill was the one that was basically presiding.
Yeah, I saw something about that, but I didn't know.
Yeah. I mean, she didn't sit in the seat where the president sits or sit beside him, but she was at the end of the table. And I mean, she seemed to be very much involved in the little snippet clips, that I saw. But the fact that she was there. And then, of course, the time that he did the 2-hour, I guess, press conference in the White House press room, and that she kind of exploded on Jen Psaki as to why did you let that go on? Because that press conference was a disaster, and she was infuriated that it was allowed to go on for as long as it did. So I can't disagree with your analysis that there might have been a lot of family influence, because I think family would have been the one group of people that could have said, Joe, it's time to retire.
Yeah, it's the old expression about taking the keys away from the grandparent. And I know I remember my father used to love to drive, but at some point kind of had to tell them they had to give up the keys to the car. So
Yeah.
that's a tough thing. And but they made so much off him. They used him for all those years, and I'm not trying to feel sorry for him, but um, the other thing that kind of shows that is that he pardoned his sister-in-law, brother, son. So he's giving them pardons. I think he kind of he knew enough to know that they could be in some legal jeopardy.
Well,
So
he didn't necessarily pardon them for past actions. He
yeah,
pardoned them for future discoveries of
hopefully,
illegality.
yeah,
Um, I'm sure that's happened before. I'm just not aware of it, and maybe it's the awareness is more because there were so many people that he pardoned that way. I mean, Fauci
yeah.
got a preemptive pardon. I
Mm.
thought pardons were generally reserved for we're going to forgive you of your crime, and
Yeah, it
this
was like
time we're going to kind of
yeah,
a different twist on it.
yeah, it was like a Nixon like crime. It's like abroad. Anything you might have done in the last 14 years, and I guess that's constitutional. It just seems to me striking abuse of that because to say someone who hasn't even been charged of a crime, well,
Yeah.
you're protected. I mean, it's like, um, but before we get off the Biden subject, I was reminded, and this could be a whole show in and of itself. What was Joe Biden's biggest gaffe over the 4-year period? And I'm not saying that the one that shows that he's senile, but the thing that he said that you just have to scratch your head and think, wow, what a horrible politician. You know what I think it was? Do you remember when they had those fires in Hawaii and it just wiped out a village in Hawaii? That was a few years ago. And Joe Biden comments on it. And what does he do? He talks about the kitchen fire in his house in
Yeah.
Delaware.
Yeah.
God, that was one of the worst gaffes. That and the other thing is, um, in the Afghanistan withdrawal debacle, and you had the 13 Americans killed. What does Joe Biden start talking about again? Beau Biden, his son Beau Biden, and he would always talk about his son dying in Iraq. He didn't die in Iraq, but he would always bring that up, and I think that started to annoy people. But
Well, I guess one of the statements that sticks with me is when he was questioned. This is prior to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and I guess he was asked, what would the United States response be? And his response was, "Well, it depends. If it's just a minor incursion, well, wait a minute. An invasion. I don't know how you then start to classify the depth of the invasion. Minor incursions, okay. Major incursions are not okay. Who defines what's major or minor?"
yeah,
And he was prone to a lot of misspeaking,
yeah,
and
and he
a lot of the things that you mentioned, it always goes back to him or his family,
yeah.
which seemed very egocentric.
Yeah, it is, and misspeaking at this level really causes problems. And in the case of Iran attacking Israel, his advice was don't.
Right.
It's just like just all that weakness that would seem to come out from him. That
Mhm.
just he was just absorbed in it, and it was bad. And then the media cover up. I have not read Jake Tapper's book, but he's talking about Original Sin. It's called, and it's interesting that Tapper and all the media for all the 4 years tried to deny that he was senile or non-compos mentis, and now that he's out of power, they're now talking about it, and it just seems makes them look so hypocritical. I guess better late than never, but
Right.
usually when we turn to the news, we're looking for the news as in now, not 4 years looking back. Kind of the news is supposed to be something that's happening now.
I remember an October 2020 interview that Jake Tapper was doing with Laura Trump, and Laura Trump was mentioning signs of the mental decline, and Tapper just went off on her and got into saying, "Oh, so you're criticizing him for his stutter and this, that, and the other, and so on and so forth," and I mean, really disparaging her.
Yeah.
And he did that very publicly. Well, apparently now he has made a private apology to her that
Mm-hmm.
in essence she was right, he was wrong. But it makes you wonder, so you make this big splash publicly in disparaging someone else's for their opinion and perspective. And yet, when that perspective was proven to be 100% accurate, rather than doing a public apology and stating that yet new details have come to light, there's a lot of ways he could couch it. He did it privately, and like you said, I'm glad he did it. Better late than never. But oftentimes they will rush to judgment, and soon after it's proven to be debunked. And I don't think he handled that part of it very well.
No, I don't think so at all. But I guess we'll have more books coming out. One thing I'm curious about is the auto pen. I find it hard to believe. I still don't believe it that a president would sign legislation or an executive order or something with an auto pen. I always assumed you're going to sign it yourself. So I don't know what exactly they're using that auto pen for, but that I think something should be. You should dig into that.
Yeah, for official government document. I mean, if you want to auto pen your Christmas cards that you're mailing out, that's fine. Yeah. But you don't auto pen legislation. You don't auto pen executive orders. You don't auto pen things that have a direct impact on other people's lives. I mean, a Christmas card is nice, but it's not going to have a big impact on my life. You sign legislation raising my taxes, that's going to have an impact on my life. Yeah, so I'm not exactly sure constitutionally. I know that I think Thomas Jefferson might have been the inventor of the auto pen, yeah, but from the little bit of research that I've done, Obama was the first one that actually used the auto pen to sign legislation, and that's a little disheartening to hear. I mean, it's not like you have to say. It's not like you have to sign or initial every page of a 1,000-page document. Yeah. You sign your name once. And if you're not competent enough to make one signature, then are you competent enough to even making the decision whether or not to sign it or to authorize someone to sign it? Yeah, it raises more questions than providing any answers.
Yeah, I agree. That auto pen should be looked into. And the other thing is, in terms of, I'm convinced, though, there's no way you can convince me that all those people that he pardoned at the end, I mean, he knew Hunter was going to get pardoned, and he knew that. He wanted that, obviously, in the family. I'm sure he was with that. But when they're commuting the sentences of all these people on death row, I find it impossible to believe that Joe Biden reviewed any of those cases. I think they came to him, they told him you should do it for social justice or whatever, and he did it. But I don't think he knew anything about those cases.
Well, it would be interesting, and I don't even know if the documentation exists, but I would think if it was the pardoning attorney, where's the work product from the pardoning attorney? Where's the pardoning attorney's written opinion that this person or that person should be pardoned or not? And the documentation of the pardoning attorney going through each one of those pardons with the president. Is there any record of that, or did the auto pen take care of all of them? And somebody knew about it, but it wasn't the president. And I mean, can a president just say, "I give you blanket authorization to sign whatever you want to sign on my behalf"? And you have no idea. I mean, you've raised an interesting question. There needs to be. I actually think there needs to be some legislative work done to clarify what an auto pen can be used for, and should there be at least a record of a verbal authorization if the person is incapacitated to the point that they physically cannot write. There ought to be a recorded authorization or a video of someone saying, because I am unable to physically write my signature, I hereby authorize David Shepard to sign this on behalf of myself and the United States government.
Yeah.
And I don't know that any of that even exists.
Yeah, I agree with you. Yeah. I don't know. It just seemed hard for me to believe that I never knew they were auto penning. I mean, when I was serving the General Assembly, well, as an intern and a staffer, uh, occasionally we'd sign some things, but nothing of legal consequence. So,
Mhm.
so
Constituent letters.
yeah, right, yeah.
Um,
I don't think we had an auto pen, but I don't think we were that
well,
sophisticated back then.
the one thing that I can tell you that any constituent letter that went out on my letterhead, I signed.
Yeah,
I that was and I usually provided the staff with 3 or 4 different letters, and they might fill in what the topic was.
yeah.
But it was my signature, and no one else signing my signature. I can assure you that.
Okay, that's good. And I guess the other issue is the Harvard case with the students, the grad students, or the exchange students that the Trump administration is trying to say, look, this is foreign policy. This is our realm. Harvard, you can't just bring in anyone you want from overseas. And I guess a court has sided with Harvard. And you were mentioning you had some issues with that.
Well,
That
it's not specifically an issue with Harvard, but this is another example where a local district court judge in Boston issued a decision saying that the executive branch doesn't have the authority to pull the student visas for individuals at Harvard or those that might want to go to Harvard. Those students that are at Harvard, is my understanding, can transfer to any other school that they want. So they're just restricting the student visa for those that want to go to Harvard. And I don't know the constitutionality of it from a Supreme Court perspective, but I think it's a growing example where we're seeing the weaponization of the judicial branch. When I taught 8th grade civics and taught the separation of powers, it was the executive branch runs the executive branch and enforces the laws passed by the legislative branch. That the legislative branch was the only one that can pass laws, make laws, and that the judicial branch didn't enforce the law. The judicial branch didn't make the law. They interpreted the law, and they interpreted the law for the constitutionality according to the Constitution as it was written, not their rewriting of the Constitution. And so, on a lot of these issues that are clearly executive branch decisions within the executive branch, I don't understand how the judicial branch is making those decisions at a local district court level that are impacting the entire nation. And I think the Supreme Court's got to get some type of handle on that. Now, if an individual going to Harvard wants to file suit, that district court judge can hear that case and make a decision on that case, because that person has standing. But I don't know how some student who lives in France and might want to come to Harvard and needs a student visa to do it is told, well, we'll issue you a student visa, but if you go to Harvard, we're going to remove that student visa, which is a foreign policy decision by the State Department, which is in the executive branch. I do think the Supreme Court has to be a lot more clarifying as to the role of the district court when it comes to the depth of their jurisdiction. I'm just not so sure that a judge in Boston ought to be able to, impact someone that lives in California or some foreign student that wants to come to the United States. And it could be that I'm just, so simple I don't understand it, but it doesn't make sense to me.
No,
According to
I agree with
the way the founders set up the framework for our government, and in reading the Federalist Papers, Alexander Hamilton, when he wrote the Federalist Papers, he wrote that the judicial branch ought to be the lesser of the 3 branches, because it's basically just interpreting the actions and the constitutionality based on other people's actions. And I don't know that it was ever set up that all three branches would have the same power, because if you do, there's no separation of powers. And that would give the president the opportunity to rule on judicial decisions, or the legislative branch the opportunity to rule on judicial decisions. If they're truly co-equal, they can mix. That's not the way it was set up. Separation of powers, checks and balances, and I just think that the checks and balances and separation of powers are a little bit out of whack right now.
Yeah, I agree, and I agree with you on injunctions. It shouldn't be. It should apply to that
Right.
district, and you can't give them the power to stop everything nationwide, because that being the case, you can just judge shop, and then you can find a judge in Hawaii, for example, or somewhere else, as they do. And I view it as a good sign that Trump's doing a good job when they're fighting him on everything. All these courts are tying him up. So I think that's good, and he's a good fighter. He got a victory, I think, the other night with the Supreme Court. But I'm losing track of all these different cases. But it shows that he's a fighter and he's doing well. So that's good. And I think the injunction case, I think will win. I don't know about the birthright citizenship case, but I think the Supreme Court will side with him, I think, on national injunctions, I hope. Knock on wood would be my guess.
Well, you talk about the birthright citizenship. You have to look at the historical context in which that amendment was passed. And it was passed to make citizens of those individuals who were slaves or born of slaves. They were already here, not by their choosing. I mean, they were brought here, and that was abhorrent. But they were here, and you had the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendments that were passed as the Civil War amendments to try to bring some stability to allowing those former slaves to be assimilated into the society as a whole. And I don't think it was ever intended that people could step across the border, deliver a baby, and boom, all of a sudden that baby was an American. I think you have to, and I would hope that the Supreme Court would look at the historical context by which these terms were used and why they were used in making those decisions.
Well, I agree. And the thing about that case in 1898, they talk about Woo Kim Ark, and I always get the name wrong, I'm sorry. But yes, his parents weren't citizens and he was born here, but the court found that his parents were permanent residents in the United States. They weren't foreign nationals. And so
Right.
they weren't illegal aliens. They weren't TPS cases. And so that's been stretched. Now, in that case, the Supreme Court did find that if you were a member of a foreign embassy or something, you weren't an American citizen. And if you were part of an invasion in the United States, then you weren't an American citizen. I would argue that it kind of is an invasion. But the other thing about the line is it says subject to the laws thereof, born in the United States, subject to the laws thereof. Well, they're subject to another country because they're foreign nationals. So they would be subject to, they're not eligible then to give birth, and the baby's an American citizen.
Well, David, let me ask you this question. What were the two primary purposes for the formation of the United States Constitution?
Well,
one, form the government.
Yep.
And two, to define the rights and responsibilities of the citizens.
Yes.
And so when people say, well, you've got to follow the Constitution, particularly on this issue of due process. Well, the whole American system was based on the Magna Carta from 1215. That's where due process was first mentioned, and it was limited to freemen, not to everybody. And the freemen were not necessarily the nobility, but they were the landowners. So it was very much a caste system. So the freemen had the right to due process, but the serfs and those involved in the lower levels of the feudal system did not have due process. So when I guess what's frustrating is people don't seem to know enough about the history and the formation and the context by which these things were done. And I certainly believe the right of due process, as stated in the Constitution, for American citizens, those that are here legally. But I'm not so sure that the founding fathers and those that wrote those amendments, when those amendments were passed, on the Fifth Amendment in the Bill of Rights and then the 14th Amendment, the post-Civil War amendments, that they actually envisioned what we have today, where due process being granted to illegal aliens.
Well, and the other thing is the Fifth Amendment says no one can be denied life, liberty, or property without due process of law. But the thing is, if you kick out illegal aliens, you're not denying life, liberty, or property.
Right.
So there's no Fifth Amendment violation. And so due process is just used to be anything you want. It's just it's not really constitutional, their vision of it.
I think it's just another example of lawfare.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, they tried to tie up Trump personally, and then politically now the court's trying to tie him up. So we'll see. I'm a little nervous about Coney Barrett. I think Kavanaugh will be okay. Gorsuch has been on long enough to be good. Roberts and Coney Barrett are always the two that make me nervous. But in fairness, she's no suitor. I don't think she's a suitor. I don't think she's a solid liberal vote. It's just she's a little too squishy for me, I think. But we'll see how that plays out. And
she seems to be very academic.
Yeah.
And look at the state of academics.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. And I guess those are a couple of the big stories. We're still waiting on the one big beautiful bill. It passed the House barely, and now we'll see what the Senate sends back. I don't know, Phil, what your view on this, but for me, and I'm a conservative and on the right, but sometimes I feel some of these members are kind of a little self-indulgent because they take the view that if it's not perfect or not great, they won't be for it. But I think in this case, we've got to realize there's a lot of good things in the bill. There's a lot of good things we have to do. And it's not as great as I'd like, but we're going to need this victory to be able to do the things that Trump wants to do and to be able to keep the House in 2 years. So failure, in my opinion, is not an option.
Correct. And if you're starving, half a sandwich is better than no sandwich. And you've got to start somewhere. And so much as I think is being misreported, particularly the traditional things of, they want to eliminate Social Security, they're going to eliminate Medicare, they're going to eliminate Medicaid. Everything that I've read and heard from the people that are writing this, and of course the devil's always in the details, and I have not read the legislation. But from what I've read is that those programs are going to be sustained and strengthened because people that are not entitled to those benefits are no longer going to get those benefits. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me that we're going to jeopardize the American Social Security system, the American Medicare system, the American Medicaid system for individuals that are not Americans or that are healthy, able-bodied, fully mentally competent, that they can't go out and get some level of employment, add something to society in exchange for receiving some of those benefits. I can remember in 1995, before they did it at the federal level, Virginia initiated welfare to work. And we put in a minor work component to receive welfare benefits. And I thought that was good. And eventually, that's what the federal government did under Bill Clinton and Newt Gingrich working together, compromise, bipartisan, in trying to address an issue. it's the devil will be in the details, but unless someone can show me what line I need to go to in that legislation that says we are cutting Medicaid to legitimate eligible recipients to save money, I'm going to go with what I've read and what I've heard, that they're just trying to eliminate those people that truly are not entitled to those benefits. I don't understand the whole idea of the Medicaid expansion being a 90% federal responsibility. Medicaid, when it was first created, was always a partnership with the states. Well, you talk about the states getting a real bonus, a 90-10 partnership. I mean, I don't understand it. Most of the time when I think of partnerships, it's not quite that weighted. And so that's what's also bloated the rolls of Medicaid. And I don't want to deny a penny to anybody that legitimately is entitled to any of the government benefits that they've earned.
Yeah, I agree. The other thing, I maybe Grover Norquist and the American for Tax Reform might disagree with me on this one, but I'm not a big fan of the high SALT deductions. For me, it just seems that, for people in New York, Illinois, California, Maryland, the thing is, you elected that state government of yours, and they have high state taxes, and now you want a big tax deduction. So
subsidized by taxpayers in North Dakota.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying I'm against a state and local tax deduction, but look, guys, I mean, you're living in New York, you're voting for these people. Same thing with Illinois, like I said, California, Maryland.
Right.
So I'm sorry you're paying high state taxes, but maybe move to Florida. But I just don't know why the taxpayers should then kick in with a big deduction for you on that one. But
I would agree with you.
But you've got some New York Republicans, you got some blue state Republicans in the House that are pushing for it. So what I'm saying, the reason I brought that up is that I would still in favor of voting for the bill, even though I'd have problems with it. That's my only point. And the problem with a Massey or a Chip Roy or some of the others is that they just want to play the purist, and they're not going to vote for anything bad. And I think that's sort of like self-indulgent. Because this way you can say, look at me, it's not on my conscience. I didn't vote for any deficit spending or anything bad, but we've got to govern, and we got to keep the House for several more terms, really, before we can do good. So,
well, the question I would ask them is, you know what? Why don't you guys publish your budget, and we can lay this budget plan against your budget plan, and let's see. I mean, instead of nitpicking, I like 95% of what's in the bill that passed, but this 5% is going to keep me from voting for it because I didn't get my way on 5%. You lay your budget bill beside this budget bill, and if you just want to do it for an area, where's the area that you would like to cut spending the most? Go and look at the bill that's passed for that area. Put yours out there. Let's put them side by side, and let's have the public conversation, and let the people see what we're talking about. And maybe the people will say, you know what? We like the Chip Roy, the Thomas Massey version better. But just nitpicking without the specifics, it's very difficult. And a lot of times, as someone that served on the Appropriations Committee, and it was a budget conferee for about 8 years, one of the things, there's two languages that get spoken. There's regular English language, and then there's budget language. And David Shepard has come to the legislature, and he wants $100. And the legislature says, well, David, we don't have but $50 we're going to give you. But we're going to give you that $50. And then David goes out and he raises cane that we've cut his budget by 50%. Yeah. David, you got $50 more than you had when you started.
Yeah, but I would spend that as $50 out of my refrigerator budget, my food budget. You take $50 out. So yeah, I know. Yeah, that's the game they play. But let's hope we get something done, even if it's got air problems in it, such as salt and things like that, because you can look on the bright side. It's got a lot of good. We can fund the border security. We can do so much. And the thing is, I'll tell this quick story. I know we got to go, but one brief example where I learned the importance sometimes of not squishing, but compromise, and how in the long run it can help you. When I was a kid and when you were young, well, actually, for my entire childhood, Democrats controlled the House of Representatives. And there were a lot of conservative Democrats. I lived with just down the road Kent Hance. He was a Bo Weevil, Southern Democrat from Texas. And I went to school with his daughter. And Hanson voted Dan Daniel from the 5th. They voted with Reagan. They were conservative, but they were still in good standing with the party because the leadership in the Democratic Party, the Tip O'Neill, Hale Boggs, Tom Foley, they were liberal. But they were willing to squish to these moderate Democrats because they wanted to stay in power. And over time, over my entire childhood, even though you had a lot of squishing by the liberal leadership to the Democrats, conservative Southern Democrats especially, they were still able to move this country in a leftward direction because they had time on their side. We need to hold the House of Representatives for a generation or two. And then if we do that, I think we can really change the country. But we can't really expect in one term to make that much of a difference. So that's just my story, my view.
When a child comes out of the womb, they don't start running.
Yeah.
There's a process.
Yeah.
You know, they roll around, they crawl, then they try to stand, they take a step or two, they fall down. Eventually, they get to the point where they're walking and then they're running. And it didn't happen overnight. So you're absolutely correct with that.
Yeah, this reminds me of this is kind of like our A.L. Philpott discussion of the Speaker of the House, Virginia delegates, was a conservative, but yet he was a Democrat and he's working with all these liberals. So hopefully it'll all get sorted out. And well, I think that's about it for now. I don't want to bore, not that you're boring, but I don't want to bore our audience, but I don't want to go on too long. But I think it's a great discussion.
And I've thoroughly enjoyed it, David. And it's been a good discussion, and it's nice to be able to have these things and bat around some ideas and some issues, and hopefully the people will find that it was worth their time.
Well, and the thing is, like I said, this is the first one I've done, and this will be posted on Substack. I know you're a follower of the Substack, so this is the Shepherd Substack community, which
very good.
All that huge yet, but we'll start it. Well, thank you, my friend, and I will talk to you soon. Good luck. You're looking good in summary, so
thanks.
Hopefully, have a good Memorial Day weekend, and hopefully get in some golf. I know you're a big golfer.
I will get in some golf. I can assure you that. If the good Lord's willing and the creek don't rise.
All right. Well, thank you, my friend, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks, David.
Good night, everybody. All right, I think we got it, my friend.
I don't know how long it was, but it went by quick.
Yeah, and I hope I didn't make a mistake. I shouldn't have said boring. It's not boring. I just meant I don't want to run on for people. That's all. I shouldn't have used it.
But I thought it was good. We covered a bunch of topics, and I think we covered them with some depth. It wasn't shallow.
All right. Well, thank you, and
all right, buddy.
All right. Thanks again. We're learning.
Take care, David. Have a good weekend.
You too.
Bye-bye.